Okay, welcome everyone to this RDA in Ireland webinar. This is a joint webinar between DRI and RDA Europe, and my name is Genevieve Halbert, by the way. I'm going to start things by giving a brief introduction to RDA Europe because I know that the RDA is a huge and, sprawling organization, and it can be somewhat confusing to try and keep track of who's who and what's what within that context. So basically, RDA Europe is the European office of the RDA. And we exist to support and cultivate and advocate for European data communities. And we're really focused on bringing together research communities and kind of bringing them into contact with the broader European um, context, but also with the global research ecosystem. So our kind of motto is inspiring European solutions with global impact. And this webinar is part of our regional webinar series. This series aims to kind of highlight and celebrate the work that's being done in the various European regions. It's also an opportunity to get a sense of what other regions are up to. So if you head to the RDA website, you can view previous webinars that we've done with the Baltics, with Slovenia. We've got one coming up with Denmark next month. And this webinar too will be recorded and hosted on the RDA website so that other, regions will be able to get a sense of what's going on in Ireland. So with that, I'll hand over to Beth. I think you're up next.
Thanks very much, Genevieve. I'm going to talk very briefly about the RDA in Ireland regional group, reintroduce us to the idea that this group does exist, and that the Digital Repository of Ireland is the coordinator of that group. It used to be the National Library of Ireland, I believe, was running the group for a little while. And then in 2024, I want to say the start of 2024, DRI took over. And we did a couple of kind of get to know the RDA webinars to sort of reintroduce the RDA to our Irish colleagues working in open research. But we haven't done a lot more with the RDA regional group recently. So I would say that this webinar is more focused on bringing more information about active RDA groups that anyone working in Ireland or around the world could join that might be of interest. So if you could go to the next slide, maybe. So again, a little bit about regional groups. There are a number of them. We are, again, a fairly recent reinvention of one of these regional groups. There's regional groups in France that are really active, and in Poland and in Slovenia, as Genevieve said. The idea behind these is that they strategically support thematic groups with potential national benefit. So we have highlighted a few groups here that we think are obviously of interest to the Irish region. They are topics that are being raised in places like the National Open Research Forum and in other groups like the Resin Network, etc. Encourage adoption and the other thing is that we're meant to encourage the adoption of RDA outputs. But it's hard to know really what is all coming out of the RDA when there are so many active groups putting out so many outputs. That one of the ways that I think that we can better connect with the RDA in the future is to have more regional representation reporting back on what is of use locally that's being put out by the RDA, how things are being adopted within our regions, that we can look to not only to the best practices, but actually like how those best practices really work in context. Can I have the next slide, please? So once again, the main reason why we do have a regional group is that we are trying to provide visibility for Irish interests within the RDA. So it is supposed to be a bit of a two-way street. We ensure representation in the RDA regions. So I do participate in the regional assembly and I get some insight into what some of the other regional groups are doing and what their priorities and interests are. And that's something that I want to have a little bit more of a forum to come back and discuss, perhaps with anyone here who would be more interested in being active in the RDA regional group itself, as well as some of the other groups that we'll be talking about today. We also want to create opportunities for support around initiatives of national interest. I think that's just generally DRI's interest as well. All right, I think the next slide is going to be a Mentimeter poll. Yes, okay, that's where we're at. So Again, before we kind of get into the roundtable of all of the groups that are actively meeting and working towards outputs and might be looking for some volunteers to help, I want to have a quick poll of just kind of who's in the room and what your interests might be if the RDA regional group was maybe a group that met more regularly and was a little bit more active. What would you like to see us do? So if you could join at menti.com, use the code there to sign in, or use the QR code. We'll just leave that up for a second, and then I will share my screen with the getting to know you kind of questions and answers that we'll do a couple of. Okay, I think I'm going to steal your screen now, Genevieve. Um, all right, we've already got some people answering questions. All right, so number one, are you an RDA member? Yes, we have a couple of individual members here, and we have an organizational member, but we have some newbies as well. Oh, and let's get rid of those talking heads there. Okay, at least one newbie as well. So we got a pretty good mix in this room. You want to join in, and we'll just see if anyone else wants to answer a question. Oh, we got another couple of individual members and an organizational member. Okay, so we have a few more people who are familiar with the RDA. That's very interesting that you're here and interested in what's going on. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide then. How many RDA groups have you already joined? If you, especially, this will be very interesting for those who are members. Ooh, three or four, five plus groups. Actually, I think I'm guilty of that myself if I were answering this question. I've joined a lot of groups just to pay attention to their updates, to find out when something new is coming out that might be of interest in a particular field of work. Okay, and then I'm guessing the non-RDA member is probably the one who has not joined a group yet, which makes a lot of sense. So for those of you who have joined the RDA, either as an organizational member or as an individual member, the average is actually more groups rather than fewer groups. That's interesting to see. This one is a little bit of a free for all. What interested you in joining the RDA? What are the kind of topics that are covered by the Research Data Alliance that got you intrigued or hooked you on the idea of joining? And this might take a second for a few answers to come in. Okay, we're seeing some things now. Community, data stewardship, okay. Research assessment, RDM generally, fair practices. Those are all very good reasons to join the RDA. Persistent identifiers is something that there are a number of groups working towards working on. And then open research. I think I said that. Oh, open data infrastructure. Okay, very interesting. We've got a few groups today. We'll be talking about that. Bioinformatics, very specific. It's possible to engage with the RDA with a disciplinary lens, and that's good to be reminded. I, for one, am part of a collections as data group, which is focused on cultural heritage collections more closely, which is obviously of interest in my role at the Digital Repository of Ireland. Recommendations, guidelines. Okay, lots of good reasons. These are all things that the RDA is engaged with. All right, this is, I think, my last slide. How can the RDA in Ireland group offer value to the Irish community? And you're welcome to type things into the chat if you have ideas other than what are listed here. But some of the things we are thinking about is a little bit more collaborative support for RDA plenaries. For instance, getting a topic put forward through the RDA in Ireland group if there isn't necessarily a place for it already within the RDA, or maybe collaborating with other working groups or interest groups, um, specifically with an Irish lens. Topical webinars related to RDA activities this is an example of one of those types of webinars, and we could certainly support more of them. Discussion sessions related to RDA activities. And I can see we're already switching around. Organizational support for RDA output adoption. Okay, that one was a popular one. That's good to see. So feel free to pick a few more things. And then I think when we come back to the Zoom screen, I'll be able to see what you're popping into the chat if you add anything for other. All right, I see someone has picked that option. Okay, it's really interesting to see organizational support for RDA output adoption floating to the top there. That would be something really interesting to get to dig more into. And I'll just let it go one more second in case someone hasn't had an opportunity to put their vote in yet. All right, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So let's take a quick look at the chat. Oh, and it's Lisa. You were putting in a comment there. Did you want to share that?
Yeah, happy to. Hello, everybody from my side as well. And my name is Lisa Lechtel. I'm a senior science officer with RDA Europe. And since there was some disciplinary interest that was expressed in the word cloud, I just wanted to put in the chat the link to the RDA group directory, because we will touch upon quite a few groups today, but none of them I think is disciplinary specific. So if you go to the group directory, you're also able to explore all the RDA interest groups, working groups, and communities of practice, and see what jumps out at you as of interest. And there are quite a few quite disciplinary specific groups as well, whether in the humanities or in life sciences and in between.
Thanks very much. All right, I think that's it for me for a moment. Genevieve, would you mind re-sharing the slides so we can go through the group tour? Thank you so much. Okay, so this has been done in some of the other regions, and I know that they've picked some groups that were maybe of more topical interest to specific regions. I hope we've nailed the groups that are of interest here. I know there's some Irish participation in some of the groups that Lisa's going to go through first. But let's get down to it. We're going to give you 2-minute pitches, which means we're not going to spend too much time just letting you know which groups are working on what and when they're meeting next. So next slide, please, Genevieve. I think this is over to Lisa.
Yeah, so time pressure. I'll try to do it justice. Genevieve, if we switch over, we'll get going on the tour of data stewardship related groups. So the first group that we wanted to highlight is the Professionalizing Data Stewardship Interest Group, which is a group that's been around since 2020. So it's a group with some history at this point. And the group takes a two-pronged approach to data stewardship, working on the one hand on facilitating peer-to-peer exchange between data stewards, and also working with data stewards themselves on thinking about data stewardship as profession. And then on the other hand, working on data stewardship from the organizational perspective and looking at how research performing organizations repositories, and so on are implementing data stewardship services, so service models, good practices, and so on. What's happening in the group at the moment? I'm one of the co-chairs, so that's why I'm saying we are. We are having community meetings about every 3 months, so about 4 times a year. And in fact, we have a next community meeting coming up next week. So I think the slides will be shared. So if you click on that link there, you'll find all the information related to the next community meeting. The community meeting is a chance to exchange with colleagues, share news, share initiatives, and also hear 1 or 2 presentations. Next Tuesday, we will have a presentation about data steward curricula from the Skills for EOSC project that recently ended. And then the other 2 things ongoing in the interest group at the moment is that the task group on data stewardship models, so service models, is developing a bank of models use cases, allowing for organizations to see how others have set up their data stewardship services. And there is a task group on data stewardship networks that's working on the sustainability of data steward networks. And there, the Irish community is very highly engaged, with Sondri being one of the founding members, I would say, of this subgroup of the interest group. Next slide, please. So the other data stewardship related group that we wanted to bring to you is the Data Stewards Career Tracks Working Group, which takes professionalization of data stewardship to be its key focus, and particularly data steward careers and career paths available to data stewards. And the group is working on a methodology for developing data steward personas, career track focused personas, and linking how personas could be linked up into career tracks, with the aim to provide a tool for organizations or at national level, or why not at European level, to define what it means to be a data stewardship professional, what it means to have a career path, what does an early career versus mid-career versus senior data steward, how does their profile look like, what kinds of skills and competences do they have, but also, how is the progression from early to senior career? And when we say progression in this working group, we do not mean any linear progression per se, because progression could also be further specialization. It could be moving from generalist to a very embedded role, or it could be also moving from data stewardship to data stewardship training, or to community management, or so on. So we're trying to map what are the possible career paths. And here, this is a new group that started in April of this year. We've had the first in-person workshop working with a group of data stewards in Slovenia to start developing this methodology that we're talking about. And we're very open to running these workshops elsewhere. So if the Irish community is interested in another workshop, we would be happy to talk and see what the possibilities are to run a workshop in Ireland. We have our regular meetings every 4th Thursday of the month. So coincidentally, that's also next week, next Thursday afternoon. And we are also running a workshop in Brisbane at the next RDA plenary. Next slide, please. Then another group that we wanted to bring to you today is Libraries for Research Data Interest Group, which promotes best practices in libraries when it comes to RDM initiatives, supporting researchers with RDM, but also developing infrastructure for RDM through research libraries. It is a group that also aims to act as a conduit to bring together various library-related professional organizations from across the world, and act as a liaison between the groups within those organizations that are focusing on RDM. This interest group has seen quite a bit of change in the last few months. They have two new co-chairs that are just starting. They started, I think, September 1st of this year, so 2 weeks ago. So we expect to see some movement within the interest group with two new co-chairs coming in. They also, at the upcoming plenary, they have a session where the session is titled Libraries as Enablers of Open Science, Open Research Communities. And at the session, they will also discuss with membership about, or potential members, about directions, interests, and so on. And the group's co-chairs, whose email or whose names you will find on the group's website, they stressed 3 times to me that I should tell everybody that they are very open to ideas from the community, to anybody who wants to do an event together with them, a webinar, an in-person event, to just be in touch. And this is something that they do quite regularly. Next slide, please. And then the final group in this section is the Data Discovery Paradigms Interest Group, which provides, again, a forum where representatives from across the spectrum of, researchers, repository managers, libraries, data stewards, and so on, come together and discuss how to improve data discovery from the perspective of data seekers. And they want to underline 3 times that their perspective is from the perspective of data seekers. This is the focus of this group. And they have recently produced recommendations, 10 principles to improve dataset discoverability. These 10 principles were released last year, and now they're working heavily on the promotion and adoption of those principles. They also have a session coming up at the plenary in a month's time in Brisbane, or virtually if you want to join virtually. And this session also will include a section of the session will be dedicated to discussing new topics that the interest group members will want to bring to the floor, and where the group could go next. And they have regular monthly meetings on every third Wednesday of the month at 12 UTC, which if I'm not mistaken, is I think 1 p.m. Irish or thereabouts. But if you go to the group's website, there's always an announcement about those meetings a couple of days in advance, and also information about how to join. So thank you. This, I think, concludes the data stewardship section.
Sorry, I think my mouse just died. I couldn't unmute myself. Let's go on to the next section then. I'm going to try and give you a little bit of an overview of a number of groups that are working in a sort of infrastructure, or at least metadata standards for infrastructure space. In here, we do actually have one group that is maybe a little bit more disciplinary specific, more focused on biology and health, but that was actually a special request from the community when I put out that we were going to be talking about these groups. I had somebody from Elixir pop up, and I think it was Gavin Farrell who said, "Can you talk about health-related disciplinary work as well?" And so, fortunately, we have a working group that was able to pop in here. All right, let's move along. I'm going to try and stick to my 2 minutes. We're going to start with research data architectures and research institutions. This group is also known as the RDA interest group. And this is meant to be all kinds of institutions or individuals working within larger organizations that are supporting data infrastructure. It's primarily concerned with technical architectures for managing research data within universities and other multidisciplinary research institutions. So it is looking both at kind of like the active management of data as well as the long-term storage of data, but I think more focused on the kind of active and immediate need for research infrastructure support. It provides insight into the approaches being taken to the development and operation of such architectures and their successes or otherwise in enabling good practice. So they do mention that the general approach to this IG is to encourage discussion about architectures. So to enable interested parties to collaborate and learn from one another. Many institutions are at present planning and working towards overarching data management architectures. There's certainly the case in Ireland. We're working towards, what do we need to build out in order to support this explosion in open research? And there is a legitimate concern that without such a forum as this, provided by the IG, institutions will relive the same experiences and repeat the same mistakes. So they are primarily a discussion forum. You'll notice as we flip through this, and you would have noticed in Lisa's slides as well, that some of them are colored green for interest groups and the other ones have different colors for working groups. And the working groups have timelines associated with them because they were formed specifically to produce an output. And they don't tend to last sometimes. Sometimes they survive beyond the output because people just want to keep getting together and revising said output, but they're meant to be shorter term groups. Interest groups are often more discussion groups, and they can meet less frequently as a result. Sometimes they really only get together at the plenaries. Our diary is going to be putting together a session at the plenary where they're looking at exploring the motivations and barriers to applying PIDs, persistent identifiers, at the institutional level. So this is a great example of taking outputs from the RDA and applying it to individual use cases. And what they're looking for from that plenary meeting and from anyone who is interested in contributing is information about how you are applying PIDs, what you are interested in, what are you thinking about in considering your use case basically for PIDs. And once again, I've got some data about the IG seeking to support research data infrastructure architects and project and service managers. So it is a little bit more focused on the technical side, but anyone who is involved in this certainly would be welcome to join. And it is primarily a knowledge sharing group. Okay, Genevieve, can you give me the next slide? The next one is a working group. We've changed slide color and we have a group that is just getting started. They're going to have their kickoff meeting at this October plenary meeting. Unfortunately, it is at 11 o'clock. Actually, I think it's, given the time change won't have happened yet, that'll be about midnight Irish time. So a bit awkward if you're not actually attending the plenary in person, but the plenary meetings are recorded. And there's collaborative note documents that are shared on the interest group and working group web pages. So you can certainly catch up with whatever happened at the meeting and then hopefully follow up from that. Their kickoff meeting is talking about trusted research environments for sensitive or confidential data. This is something that is of huge interest. I think anyone working in data infrastructure in supporting better. The working group seeks to produce a better understanding of the elements making up trusted research environments and their different extensions, flavors, etc. And the processes running in and supported by them, bridging terminology boundaries to ease the setup and operations of cooperation and interoperability between such infrastructures. So enabling fair access and use of data in restricted settings, which is always a challenge. So one of the things that the working group aims to do is to create a reference model of types of trusted research environments. They want to develop interoperability recommendations so that we understand how we can access those different types of environments and what those limitations might be in sharing, and how obviously we can encourage a more open environment with the necessary restrictions. And they want to produce a risk catalog to help lower the risks of sensitive data sharing overall, so that there are researchers who better understand when they really do need to restrict their data and when perhaps that the risk does not warrant the level of restriction they might be applying. So if that is something you're at all interested in, these are outputs that probably 12, 18 months from now, we will see the results of from this working group. All right, next slide, please. We have an example here of a working group that was supposed to be a short-term working group and that just kept going. I think the data citation working group has effectively been around for like a decade at this point. They originally produced a set of recommendations for sharing dynamic data. And then I think they went a little bit dormant for a while, and they brought it back to revise those recommendations, to test them against whether or not they still worked in the current environment. So we're giving them a kind of status of they're not a starting group, they're a making progress group, but really they should probably be in that orange bit of winding up. But who knows if they'll just start over again in another few years. At the moment, they want feedback on these revised recommendations, and they are holding a meeting at the plenary in October on precise actionable references to dynamic data. They've actually more or less dropped the citation piece out of the new set of recommendations, and they're talking more about references because they found that there's a bit of a confusion between data citation as something that you do in order to acknowledge that you've used someone else's work versus data citation as in precisely referencing exactly what part of that work that you might have used. So they are looking for use cases representing novel applications, perhaps, of dynamic data citation, such as versioning, online learning, AI systems, cross-links to reproducibility in science, EU AI regulation. But certainly, if you have an application in which you are thinking that recommendations for dynamic data would apply in your situation, or you have questions about how you would apply that, I would encourage you to join that meeting and contribute to their collection of use cases of who might be using these recommendations. Next slide, please. And finally, we have multi-omics metadata standards integration. This is another working group that has been working for a little while now, and they are in the midst of working towards additional outputs. So they have already produced a couple of outputs. They have an omics standard landscape review curation workflow, an interactive web-based dashboard tool, which you can access through the link there. And they also have a multi-omics fair sharing standards collection. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the fair sharing registry, this is a registry of databases and metadata standards and policies that relate to open research globally. And this is a collection that has been published in Fair Sharing that ensures that these standards are more widely available beyond the RDA, because that's always a challenge with these things, is that the people who write them take them home and use them because they needed them, but then you have to socialize them more broadly. So upcoming outputs that they are working on, they have a MOMSI fair sharing collection, automated reports, and cross-mapping activity template with use case examples that they want to develop. So you might be able to provide a use case, or you might be interested in exploring what those use cases could be and contributing to this. They have a final recommendations report that I think is meant to be kind of wrapping up their working group in December 2025. But then they are also producing a research article that discusses all of this work. So the point of this working group is that they provide scalable solutions to persistent data integration challenges in evaluating the accuracy and completeness of existing research data and metadata community standards and improving open access to expert-reviewed recommendation materials. And their deliverables that they have obviously contributed a couple of them now, but they're still working towards finishing, are meant to improve transparent processes for domain-informed standard selections and decision-making, and continuous curation and reuse, transparency, supporting next-generation multi-omics data integration, refinement of existing resources, and future developments by the research community. So they popped in a little QR code into their slide here because I don't think they have a meeting scheduled at the moment, but if you want to get involved with them, I would join the group and watch out for meeting invites. All right, I think we can move on to the next slide. And I'm going to pass it back over to Lisa now.
Yeah, so we now have two more slides on two or three, and actually have more slides. We have a couple of slides on training and outreach related interest groups, and then Beth will also talk about RDA ambassadors. But first, if we go to the next slide, I want to highlight that education and training on handling of research data interest group which is one of several interest groups that in one way or another focuses on training materials, related information exchange. And they are focusing specifically on peer-to-peer exchange around how to develop materials and how to deliver training or support or training resources around research data management throughout the research data lifecycle. And they have also been doing some work around identifying and classifying skills required, both by researchers as well as by research data management professionals, data stewards, RDM specialists around research data and how to manage fair and care research data. They are also having a session at the upcoming plenary, and this session will focus on the evolution of RDA training to empower communities. And they actually have still open a call for contributors to that session. The call closes tomorrow on September 19th. And they would like to involve real life examples from trainers or whoever is delivering training around RDM, around how their training approach may have changed in the last decade or so. So they're interested in seeing how RDM training delivery has evolved over the last few years. And there's also, as with one of the previous interest groups, there's an open invitation to connect with co-chairs to discuss ideas for joint activities, joint events. They also have a new co-chair that started, I think, in August, and is likely also bringing new ideas and activities to the interest group. And this, I think, is, since I've now mentioned it twice that groups have new co-chairs, I think it's good to highlight here that, if you're interested in a group, if you want to get involved, you attend some of their meetings and you see that this is a community that's doing work that's of relevance to you and where you want to contribute. In most groups, there are regular opportunities, if you so desire, for example, also to become a co-chair of a group. And in the context of RDA, being a co-chair of a group means that you take on a leadership role, you are able to shape that group and its outputs. So it's in addition to being a great networking opportunity, because you get to know other people who work on those topics across the globe. It also provides opportunities for personal and professional growth that way. Then if you go to the next slide, please. So the last group that I will introduce you today is the Evaluation of Research Interest Group, which is a group that stands for recognizing fair data and software as first-class research outputs, and aims to coordinate relevant activities and efforts across the RDA, but also liaising with other initiatives around broadening the spectrum of research outputs that we recognize as first-class outputs. So in particular, at the moment, they have started working and liaising with Quora, and they have established a liaison, identified a liaison person working with Quora from the interest group side. And they are also connecting to a number of global initiatives around research evaluation and assessment, and trying to make sure that those initiatives are aware of each other, are engaging with one another, and that the work around evaluation of research, especially as it relates to data and software products, is everybody stepping with the same foot and know what others are doing. They also have a session at the upcoming plenary. And this session is at a time that if you're attending virtually from Europe, it's quite an early morning, but for an early riser, it might already be in the doable range of times. And at that session, they are highlighting, what they have been doing up until now, where they are going. So it will be a great way to learn what the group is doing, get engaged, and contribute to your perhaps national experience around research, evaluation, and research assessment. So I leave it here and turn it over to Beth.
You so much, Lisa. All right, I get to talk about two groups that I am actually much more actively involved in. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Collections as Data Interest Group, which we started at the fall 2023 plenary. We had what's called a Birds of a Feather session, where we just ask the RDA community if there's interest in starting a group. So we're still very new in terms of what it is that we want to do with the group. We were holding monthly meetings. We have a survey out right now where we're asking the group if that is something that they would like to continue or if there are more dedicated activities. Sometimes interest groups will spin off working groups if there are activities that people want to be involved in. An interest group is a place that can generate those kinds of ideas because you meet to discuss. So we are doing some new work in this space. We were going to have a plenary session, and unfortunately, we had to pull it because I'm not going to actually be able to go to Brisbane. I'm very jealous of anyone who is going to Australia in October. But we are continuing work on adapting data sheets for digital cultural heritage data sets to DMPs for humanities researchers. So this is taking an output that is designed to describe cultural heritage collections as data sets so that they can be more easily reused by researchers, describing the scope, what's present in the collections, but also what's missing, what potential biases might exist in historical collections to kind of advise anyone who's using anything at scale what potential biases or problematic information might be derived if you took the collection at face value. And then mapping that to data management plans that humanities researchers have to submit, and researchers in all disciplines have to submit in order to acquire grants. Or in a lot of institutions, data management plans are requirements just generally for anyone doing research, whether or not it's funded research. But I realize I've gotten ahead of myself a little bit. The Collections as Data Interest Group is designed, we established it to build relationships among collections professionals. So we are thinking more strongly about cultural heritage. That's where we see the collections manager or curator typically work. Archivists or librarians working in places like special collections. Those are the kinds of targeted groups that we're looking at. But we recognize that there's a variety of scientific collections, for instance, that might also have a lot of parallels to historical scientific collections represented as cultural collections. And how do you do that effectively and represent perhaps changing perspectives on how science is done or how cultural heritage is described? So the idea behind the group is that it has the capacity to produce recommendations. That is a goal that we're going to work towards, but we are currently more of a discussion group addressing fundamental challenges to research data by sharing by research data sharing by bringing preservation, arrangement, and description and appraisal methodologies from the cultural heritage and information management sectors to the wider RDA community. We have a lot of overlap with the RDA for Libraries group. And I think probably I should reach out to their co-chair to see if we could host a sort of co-event between Collections as Data and the RDA for Libraries group. So again, we have a survey out to our membership at the moment, which I realize the link is not in the slide there, so I'll provide that in the chat afterwards. And we are looking for more people to participate as co-chairs. Also some regional diversity in that. So while we would welcome another Irish co-chair, we are looking for another global co-chair as well, if you happen to know anyone in your networks. All right, next slide, please. And finally, I get to talk about the RDA Ambassadors Coordination Group. This is a bit of an oddball group in that it's not a working group and it's not actually an officially recognized interest group. It is something that is being coordinated from within the RDA. It's been approved by the RDA Secretariat that has the benefit or the potential to one day kind of morph into a more formal interest group, but it's still in a phase where a lot of people just want to talk about, well, what could we potentially do? The group has monthly drop-in sessions. Our next session is going to be October 9th. They tend to happen on Thursdays at 3 p.m. once a month. There's a Zoom link there if you want to click on it to register. We meet to talk about what it is that people are working on in their fields generally. People share updates about anything to do with research data management that they are working on that they'd like their colleagues to know about. But we are working towards a couple of outputs now too. We've started to coordinate more formally. And we have developed a speakers list for open research conferences and festivals around the world. This is going to be published on the RDA page with a list of names and specializations with people credited as RDA ambassadors. We are going to be looking at revising disciplinary information sheets, which were developed as part of a funded project for RDA, the EOSC Future project, that are now already a little bit out of date and perhaps could be revised to better reflect the kind of changing landscape of disciplinary research globally. We are looking at creating slide decks and guides to navigating the RDA as well. So one of the things that the ambassadors hope to do is to make RDA itself a little bit more accessible to people. So the RDA Ambassadors Coordination Group aims to support the dissemination mainly of RDA outputs and activities across the disciplines. We're looking at increasing the diversity of representation in the RDA community through the ambassadors by having them go out to their local communities and tell them about the RDA. And those communities, again, could be disciplinary communities, they could be global thematic communities. And we want to promote the RDA mission and values because the more input you get into RDA, the more reflective it's going to be of open science, open research practices globally. Ambassadors work towards advancing an awareness and understanding of cross-cutting themes in the RDA interest and working groups. So one of the things that they're doing when they come to the group and talk about what it is that they're working on is they're facilitating some cross-pollination between these interest and working groups. Someone who is not a member, for instance, of the multi-omics standards integration working group could could share what the collections of the data interest group is doing and see if there's any kind of synergies that somehow emerge that were unexpected because those disciplines don't necessarily talk to each other. And anyway, we are aiming to make the ambassadors key resources for newcomers to the RDA. So we're hoping to have some ambassadors on hand at the Brisbane plenary, so you know who to talk to if you're new at the RDA and want to get some insight. All right, I think I've probably gone over my 2 minutes per slide, but that was it. That is our 2 minute roundup. I think we've got a couple of concluding slides here. So maybe we can move on. Yeah. So as Lisa mentioned, these are not all the groups that are active or looking for input. These links here on this slide represent birds of a feather sessions that have been proposed at the upcoming plenary, which means these are call outs to the RDA community to say, should we have an interest group or a working group that deals with these topics? So if you are at all interested in any of the things that are presented here, such as a framework for assessing the value of research data, this is your opportunity to get in on the ground floor and help direct help direct the group forming in the first place and then direct the success of those outputs. Next slide, please. And a reminder that the RDA 25th plenary meeting is happening. You can attend it virtually if you're unable to go to Australia, but the times are on the other side of the world. So they will be nighttime meetings for the most part. Next slide. All right, we have time for questions. I don't see anything in the chat, so it's possible that you guys are okay with just the showcase.
Can I ask the participants a question? Could
Sure,
we,
go ahead.
if we can like get a wave of hands or something, if some of you are already members of some of the groups that we presented today.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
do I count?
Potentially
It's
not.
looking like we might have gotten all new groups.
Yeah. But I think because there's kind of like in terms of what people were interested in at the beginning with open research and data stewardship and PIDs and so on. I think was a collection of groups that could
Yeah,
provide
that hit on
safe
those.
change for the participants. So we hope that you did find something where you at least want to go and take a closer look on the RDA website. And do, you know, when you go to the groups page, and it looks like something that you might be interested in, to not be, you know, hesitant to contact the co-chairs. Oftentimes, you know, or usually contacting the co-chairs is the best way to get involved, and just email the co-chair, send them a message through the website, and this way you will, you know, get from the co-chairs information about how to best get involved in what's going on. I see a comment in the chat that a lot of the groups are actually new, so and that the commenter joined some of them, so that's great to know. You know, if you want more information about what to, you know, how to actively engage, please do feel free to contact the co-chairs if you don't find information in the post section, for example. The post section on the website for each group is usually where next meetings are announced or other related events are announced, and that's the best way to get information. But if you find no like current information there, then just contact the co-chair.
And I just popped the survey for the collections as data interest group into the chat there, but I will also add that into the slides after the fact, which I imagine probably will be posted alongside the recording on the RDA website after this. Okay, perfect. So the survey is open till September 30th, just FYI.
And, you know, we do hope to see some of you again in some RDA contacts, whether it be as, you know, a member of a group or the plenary or another webinar. So thank you from my side at least, thank you for joining today and listening in. And I'll let Beth and Genevieve to close this.
Yes, thank you very much for coming today.